Welcome to the Clique podcast. I'm Danny Watson, a mindset and manifestation expert and founder of the Clique, a company that helps women overcome their fears and limiting beliefs to create a life and business that they love. Within this podcast, I will help you get clear on what you want, identify the blocks that are holding you back, transform your mindset and raise your vibration so that you can co-create magic with the universe. If you are looking to design a life that truly sets your soul on fire and manifest more success and abundance, then you are in the right place. Hello ladies, and welcome to this week's episode. We are coming to the end of 2024 and we thought it would be a great way to wrap up the year by sharing some of the best bits from the podcast from over the past 12 months. We've covered lots of different topics over the past year, everything from working on your mindset, building your confidence, tuning into your feminine energy, law of attraction, building a coaching business. So for this episode, we have curated some of the best bits from the podcast over the past 12 months. And I hope that this will be a little reminder of what you perhaps want to take with you into the year ahead. So with that being said, ladies, enjoy this episode and I will catch you on the next one. Now, the other thing that I am quitting in the year ahead is the tendency to isolate myself when I am stressed or overwhelmed. So my husband laughs about this. He calls me, a lone wolf because I'm an extroverted introvert. So to a lot of people who meet me, they perhaps assume that I am extroverted because I'm quite outgoing, I'm just social. If, let's say, I'm at an event, I'll be very, very chatty with people. I'm very confident in going up to new people and having conversations and being charismatic around other people. Yet I need a lot of alone time in order to be energized. And I actually find my capacity for being around lots of people has really been diminished over, I'd say, perhaps the past 5 years, which incidentally coincides with me becoming a mother. I was laughing to my husband about this. Somebody had shared something on Instagram about, being so touched out by their kids that they couldn't let their husband touch them anymore. And he was laughing because I actually feel like I've my capacity to be around people and to be, interacting or touched has been diminished because, I've got children and, they're very much, when they're around me, it's mama, mama, mama all the time. They're constantly wanting to be cuddled. They're constantly wanting to be picked up. They constantly need me. So I am constantly attending to their needs so that when I'm not, it's like, okay, now I just need to be in an empty room and speak to nobody and just be silent. And then unfortunately, my husband comes in for the cuddle and I'm like, just give me 2 minutes to just be alone. So we've laughed about this as a couple, but it's definitely something I want to quit, this self-isolation in times when I perhaps need to be around other people the most. So, for example, when I normally sort of retreat into myself, it's normally because my nervous system has gone into overdrive. Normally this happens at times when I feel that I've been overstimulated. So let's say, that all of the kids are at home and they're all commanding my attention. They all want me for something. They all want me for different things. They're all asking questions at once. They're wanting to be picked up. They're wanting to be cuddled. They want food making. And, we're not even at 8 a.m. So then a full day of that, by the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I just need to zone out and do nothing and just be by myself. So my nervous system at this point is, incredibly heightened and deregulated. And I sort of retract from being around others, where actually something like a cuddle, for example, is an amazing way to actually soothe your nervous system and regulate your nervous system, as can just talking to somebody and not necessarily needing their advice or, words of wisdom, but just have somebody to just listen to. And I think this is often why coaching works so well is because, as coaches, we create these safe spaces where we're not necessarily telling somebody what to do, but we're asking questions and giving somebody a platform to have what they're feeling and what they're experiencing just be vocalized, and just, have somebody to listen to those things. And for me personally, even though I'm an advocate of coaching, again, when I have these moments of, overwhelm or anxiousness or just not feeling great, I isolate, where actually these are the times where I need to be actually opening up more and actually connecting with my husband or with somebody else and really sharing what I'm feeling, rather than feeling that burden alone. And I think this is the thing. It's because I sort of perceive it as a burden. If I'm feeling negative, I don't want to burden other people with what I'm feeling as well. So sometimes my instinct is to just bottle all of that in and to struggle alone and suffer in silence, where actually, we all know that a problem shared is a problem halved. So our subconscious mind always wants to reinforce our belief system. The daily habits that we have, the choices that we make, how we decide things, the actions that we take, these things are largely dictated by our subconscious mind, which is a reflection of our belief system. So if subconsciously, if deep down we believe that things need to be hard work, this is going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy where that hard work belief is going to be reflected in our reality. So in order for us to allow things to be easy, we first need to reprogram any subconscious thinking that says this needs to be hard. Now, the challenge here is that if you've had a life of working hard and getting great results, you've got a life of evidence to really reinforce that belief. So this is going to be a belief that's very strong in its foundations, because it's probably something that's been programmed from a very early age, but it's also going to have been reinforced over time through all of this evidence where, you've worked hard, you've got results, you've been praised for working hard. So changing this belief is something you're going to have to be quite compassionate with yourself, because it's probably not going to be an overnight thing. This is unraveling years of conditioning and years of reinforcement of this belief. Something simple that you can do is just a simple mantra every single day. Something like, this gets to be fun. I allow success to be easy. And actually visualizing yourself on a daily basis, showing up from the place of ease and flow. So let's say you've got a project with your work, whether it's in your business or in your job, and you're thinking about all of the things that you need to do. Rather than seeing the stress, the struggle, the hard work that you will have to go through in order to get the results that you want, can you start to visualize an alternative way of getting to your desired goal? So can you visualize yourself showing up and things being easy? What would that look like? How would you go about your tasks if things were fun, light, and easy? How would you make decisions? How would your energy be? Probably operate from this more relaxed, calm, centered place if you were allowing things to be easy. So just visualizing the process of ease, getting yourself to experience that at an internal level first, will help you then be able to experience that in your physical world. Remember that your subconscious always wants to pull you back to what's familiar. So if what is familiar to you is hard work, stress, and struggle, then you need to familiarize yourself with the opposite internally. So this is what visualization is doing. We are getting ourselves to imagine ourselves showing up, and it's fun, it's easy. I'm lighthearted as I go about my work. I make time for rest and for self-care. I know what my boundaries are. I know when I need to take a break. I don't just push through and struggle through regardless. I am very in tune with my body and my energy, and I know where I need to slow down. If you start to visualize yourself operating from this place first, it's going to be much easier to bring that energy into your day-to-day life. Now, what was kind of a big wake-up call for me is that I realized that during my morning ritual, which is a process for me that helps me to not only relax, but really connect with myself, really connect with what I want with life. And it's really a signal for me to be kind of fully intentional and present about the life I'm creating first thing in the morning. So rather than that automatic switching on, autopilot of life, of just doing the doing the things, getting up, getting a coffee, scrolling through Instagram. It's my, conscious decision to be like, okay, I'm going to sit with myself for 20 minutes, 30 minutes this morning, and I'm going to do this routine. And it was almost like the routine had become this opportunity for me to dissociate, because in that moment, I was no longer fully conscious and present with my body, but I was drifting off. I was feeling numb. I was really struggling to get to that high vibe place, which I'd been in previously when, my morning routine, it made me feel good. It made me feel so connected to my higher self. It made me feel so excited. I could actually feel, that vibration rising within me. I was feeling so optimistic about my future. But then it got to a point where it was almost like I was just going through the motions of this morning routine. And it's because I was approaching it and I was in this dissociated state. So maybe you've experienced this as well, where a morning routine or a ritual that you've got that initially was something that made you feel incredible, that energized you, that made you feel deeply connected to yourself and to your goals and to your purpose. That routine has now almost become a way to kind of numb out. It's something where you're just going through the motions. You're not necessarily feeling anything from that morning routine. If you're experiencing this, it may be a good sign that you are actually dissociating. Now, dissociation, what it is, it's a psychological defense mechanism. And it's often a response to a traumatic event. So this could be something traumatic that's happened in childhood. But trauma can actually be categorized in lots of different ways. So it may be that for somebody, their trauma is experiencing long, prolonged periods of chronic stress, maybe overworking, being in very overwhelming situations. Dissociation then manifests itself as a coping strategy. So let's say you've been experiencing, long periods of stress for a very long time. So maybe that's kind of all you know. Maybe that's your emotional home. You struggle to really switch off. You struggle to relax. You're always in this kind of heightened sense of arousal, this flight or fight mode, especially when it comes to your work. And what happens is that our nervous system then becomes deregulated. And dissociation, it's a coping mechanism in response to feeling unsafe. So a normally regulated nervous system, it can experience stress, but once the stress is gone, it will return to normal. So when the anxiety disappears, when it's past, the nervous system will return to normal. Now, this period where you have this ability to engage in self-regulation, so your nervous system returns back to normal again, it's called the window of tolerance. And normally through a typical day, we're going to go through several cycles of this during a day. So we'll be exposed to potential stressors, potential, threats or anxieties. We'll have this heightened nervous system, but then it will very much go back to normal again once, the stress goes away. Now, the window of tolerance is our optimal zone of arousal for a person to function in everyday life. So when a person is operating within this zone, this window of tolerance, they're able to effectively manage and cope with or control their emotions and their stress. So they have more room to let the stressful things happen. They can come and go, and it might affect them for a short while, but it's not going to be this long-lasting, prolonged, heightened sense of arousal. For anybody that's new to this work, I would introduce it to you and give you a bit of an understanding of what feminine archetypes are and how you can really utilize this concept for your own personal growth and as you step into your own feminine leadership era. So let's just start by thinking about what is an archetype. Well, it's essentially a combination of qualities, thoughts, behaviors that a woman or a man displays. So archetypes are patterns of behavior that can actually aid and influence our mental, emotional, and spiritual growth as human beings. So we all have the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies within us, whether we are a man or a woman. And a divine feminine archetype is when a woman embodies the highest expression of her feminine energies. So a big part of the work that I do as a feminine leadership coach is really to help women find their unique sweet spot between the masculine and the feminine, and really get into alignment with the correct balance that is going to work for them, that's going to help them show up in the most powerful way, that's going to help them step into their highest possible version of themselves. So this is where these feminine archetypes can really come into play. Now, when we wear these masks, we need to remember that it isn't really who we are. These are just masks. And as such, there's always going to be this acceptance void. So this is why it often feels like no matter how much we do, no matter how much we try and please others, we never feel not enough. And this is why the good girl will often struggle with things like low self-worth, low self-esteem, because there's always that feeling of not enoughness. And there's also going to be this feeling of, okay, well, we may have been accepted whilst we're wearing the mask, but if it's not our true self that's receiving acceptance, we need to remember that it isn't really our true self. It's our good girl identity. It's the girl who works hard, the girl who's productive, the girl who conforms to expectations, the girl who makes others look good, the girl who sacrifices her own needs. This is the one that's getting the acceptance. But what the good girl wants, what she really wants, is to be loved without that mask. To be loved when she's being lazy, to be loved when she gets angry, when she refuses to conform, when she disappoints somebody. She wants to be loved when she can't be bothered to, make polite small talk or, try and be the peacekeeper. And what's really interesting is that we often deeply want to be loved by others when we aren't wearing the mask. Yet wearing the mask is often the only way we are able to truly love ourselves. And so this is where self-love really comes into play. Because self-love means to love the real you. The you even in your not so finest moments. The you when you're not wearing that mask of the good girl. So the love you are able to receive from others is mirrored in the love that you give yourself. So if we really want to lose the good girl identity and trust we will still be accepted, it starts with loving ourselves without the mask too. Sometimes we think our biggest fears are going to be starting something new and at the beginning of our journey. And often we don't realize that as we progress, as we up-level, our life up-levels, our business up-levels, actually that can often require us to make some big changes within our mindset as well. And we will be presented with new fears, new patterns of self-sabotage. So the fear that I'm actually talking about here in particular is that fear of success. And it's an interesting one because I think at the beginning of our journey, the thing that we feel like we fear the most is the fear of failure, the fear of things going wrong, the fear of things not working out for us. And that I definitely found to be true for myself and for many of the women that I've worked with. But as we start to see evidence of our success and we start to realize this is something that I can do and I'm making momentum and this is all working out for me, we then hit this next kind of ceiling where we're like, but what if it becomes bigger than I ever thought? What if it becomes even bigger? And it's that fear of that next level. So it's really interesting that we can actually fear something that really we very much crave. So for most of us, we want to be successful. We want to have a super successful business. We want to be wealthy. We want to have that freedom. We want to have all of the things that success involves. Yet below the surface, there can actually be a lot of fears tied in with that. And I want to explore this a little bit more in this podcast because sometimes that fear of success, it's the silent sort of fear, and it can create these patterns of self-sabotage, and perhaps we don't even know what's really going on. So this was definitely something I experienced, as I said, going from 6 figures to 7 figures. And to be honest, every time that I kind of decide, right, I am ready for a huge, massive up level within my business, I really want to take things to that next level, I have to meet this fear head on again, this fear of what does me stepping into that next level, what's that ultimately going to mean? And some of the common fears that I'm sort of faced with, first of all, is can I handle this level of success? Am I going to crumble under the pressure? What am I going to feel about that level of responsibility? Sometimes I get into my head about, well, what if I get to this next level and I can't maintain it? And then things start falling apart. So it's almost that pressure to sustain a certain level of success. Something that's cropped up for me in the past, something doesn't necessarily kind of bother me so much now, but going from that sort of 6-figure to 7-figure, it really, really bothered me. And that was, what are other people going to think of this new level of success that I've created? I could very much handle the 6-figure thing. Like that for me felt within the realm of possibility. And it was something that I wasn't really too scared about sharing with other people. And I think this was because it was very much within the comfort zone of what I knew. So I'd never made 6 figures within my career previously, but I saw lots of other people that were doing that. And so it didn't necessarily feel so out of reach. And, you know, some of my friends were making that kind of money within their corporate careers. So it kind of felt comfortable. And I didn't necessarily see getting to that benchmark as being too much of a scary thing. However, when I thought about going from 6 figures to 7 figures, my biggest resistance was, how are people going to meet me with that goal? When I start expressing that desire, where I start sharing, you know, my income milestones, are people going to look at me differently? Are people going to assume certain things about me? For example, you know, my big thing was, I'm going to be perceived as somebody that only really cares about the money. And I did a lot of work around this because I realized that growing up, and this is where a lot of our subconscious patterns and fears come from, a lot of my childhood, my parents would often make comments about people that had money, you know, almost sort of derogatory comments about how they'd been able to make their money, or certain comments about their characteristics, like, oh, they only care about money, oh, they're such a show-off, oh, they're a bit arrogant, or all they do is work, that's all they care about, oh, they're so flashy, they're so showy. And so it was these sort of comments that kind of ingrained it in me that it's only acceptable to create wealth up to a certain limit. And beyond that, it almost becomes this bad thing where I'm going to be viewed in a negative way by the people who I love and care about. I have definitely shared my sort of financial journey as I've become a business owner and as I've become a coach, but in comparison to, I guess, how a lot of women show up online, I've actually been quite reserved in terms of how much I share, how frequently I share, really on my social media platforms. So, for example, my Instagram, I don't really share much about what I'm earning on there. I obviously mention it a little bit in my podcast every now and again, and some sort of masterclasses that I've done. But really, I've kind of, I guess, held back in a lot of ways from being, you know, too open about how amazing my business is doing and the finances that it's making. And I think I'm still, I guess to a certain extent, still something that I do struggle with. And I think it's something that I'm still working with in this regard, this notion of not wanting to outshine others. This is the thing with topics such as law of attraction, manifestation. Often when I get asked questions on these, what people are really looking for is practical solutions. So, for example, what is one strategy I can start using to let go of the how? And of course, these tools and practical strategies are great, but what we need to remember is there's normally some deep-rooted reason as to why we're showing up in a certain way anyway. So if we're somebody that doesn't like to let go of the how, let go of that control, that needs to have everything kind of mapped out and figured out, we need to kind of really be digging into where that actually comes from so we can really heal that pattern at the root cause. And 9 times out of 10, the inability to let go and let go of control, 9 times out of 10, it will come from our childhood. That's kind of where the seed was initially planted. And then it's kind of reinforced through our adult experiences as well. What I found to be true with most cases of women that I've worked with is this inability to let go of the how. It comes down to the feeling of safety. So very similar to what I was just saying, it's this element of control. It gives us this feeling of reassurance, this feeling of safety. there is no point in having a practical tool which will teach you how to let go of the how if deep down you don't feel truly safe letting go of control. So that is the thing that really needs to be addressed first. Feeling totally safe in your body to let go, feeling totally at ease to relinquish control, and trusting that nothing bad will happen. Now, something else that is worth mentioning here is that letting go of the how doesn't necessarily mean letting go of the how entirely. I think sometimes we look at these things and we think of them in very black and white terms. So I am manifesting, and part of that needs me to surrender, therefore I have to fully surrender. And I don't think that is necessarily the case. The way that I see things, in the same way that I view the balance between the masculine and the feminine energy, it's about finding that unique sweet spot. Remember, we're on a path of co-creation with the universe. So we're working side by side. So this isn't about the universe doing all of the work and us just fully surrendering and just trusting the universe to do its part. This is about us perhaps showing up, the universe showing up, and we're kind of in this dance together. Now, something else that I would do, and this is going back to what I said about being delusional, is just really kind of just the way that I was speaking to myself and really shaping my internal narrative and what I was thinking about at any given moment. So my thoughts, as much as possible, were aligning with the reality that I wanted to create. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say when I was back in the little flat that I was living in, and it wasn't the mansion that I was dreaming of, I would wake up in the morning, and rather than waking up and looking at all of the things that irritated me about the room that I was in, I would say, oh, it is so wonderful to be waking up in this dream home. And I would just take a moment or so to just think in my head about, well, what would it be like right now if I was walking out of my bed, out of my bedroom, down the stairs into my beautiful kitchen? How would I be feeling right now? And I would spend a moment to just try and connect with that vision. I would try and energetically feel as if I was in that scene, as if I had projected myself into my future life, and that's what I was experiencing. So it was almost as if I could see my reality in front of me. I wasn't walking around with, my eyes closed. My eyes were open, but I was looking at life through these rose-tinted glasses. And this takes a certain level of concentration, admittedly, and it will be something that you will get better with at time. I feel like I was quite lucky in this sense because I've always had quite a vivid imagination. I had imaginary friends when I was younger. We would go on these incredible adventures together in my back garden. We saw the whole world in my back garden. My mind was very, very sort of creative and active, and I spent a lot of my time in my imagination as a child. And I think this has served me very well. For other people, it might sound like you're being crazy or delusional, but I would actually, in getting into the habit of this, is even speaking the words out loud. It's like, oh, I love my beautiful Calcutta marble worktops. I didn't have Calcutta marble worktops. They were from IKEA. They were plastic, laminate. But in my mind, I was in this beautiful kitchen. I was making my espresso. So the way that I was energetically tuning into my day was as if I was already living this dream life. And it may sound crazy, and if other people hear you, they might think you're a little bit cuckoo. I had flatmates who probably thought I was absolutely bonkers. However, for me, it worked because I may be physically in one place, but emotionally, energetically, I was someplace completely different. And it really turned what could have been a very frustrating period of my life into something that started to feel very, very luxurious and high vibe, because most of it I was living out in my imagination. Let's say, for example, you are a business owner, or maybe you're looking to start a business, and this business is a way for you to change your financial reality. In what ways are you keeping yourself busy within your business, but actually avoiding doing the things that could make you money sooner rather than later? So going back to my example, it was doing lots and lots of things within my business, making my website look pretty, spending lots and lots of time on these pretty social media images, which of course are important, but ultimately the thing that I knew deep down that would make me sales was actually just getting somebody onto a call and talking directly to somebody about my coaching, and then actually making an offer for them to join my program. These are the things that I was avoiding. Now, another pattern of financial self-sabotage is actually making money harder than what it needs to be. And this is actually very much linked to the avoidance of money, because if we make the creation of wealth within our life, if we make this a really difficult, challenging task, what we're ultimately doing is we're avoiding making money for ourselves. So these two are linked. But this one, how this shows up is that we try and make things more complicated than what they need to be. So rather than just allowing making money to be the easiest and simplest possible thing that we can do, we try and set the benchmark super high for what we need to do and what we perhaps need to create in order to bring money in. So a good example of this was going back to the earlier days of my coaching business, where I was doing a lot of working one-on-one with my clients. And I got to a point where I had a number of these discovery calls scheduled for women that were wanting to inquire about my coaching. And rather than taking these calls and, signing up these clients, I decided, actually, I'm going to cancel these calls, because what I would like to do, I would like to be able to give my clients access to this incredible online program. So when they sign up to work with me one-on-one, we don't just have the coaching sessions, we also have this online program as well. Now, that in itself, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But what I was actually doing was I was avoiding making money in that moment. And I was actually making things way more complicated than what they needed to be. I had women there that were ready to pay me, ready to start working with me. And I realized actually that getting the one-on-one clients, it got to a point where it started to feel quite easy. I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to do this amazing work with women. It's not really commanding huge amounts of my time. I show up for a session, I do a 1-hour session. They're incredibly happy with that session. Maybe there's a little bit of communication in between sessions, but on the whole, this feels fun. There's no stress, there's no pressure. This is really enjoyable. And in my mind, making money couldn't be so easy and enjoyable. I had to prove myself through working hard. So I had subconsciously created this pattern of sabotage where every time it felt like money was coming in relatively easy into my business, I would make things more difficult for myself by adding new things into my to-do list. So adding in this really complex, program where, yes, okay, that ultimately was something that I wanted to do. But it was almost like I had to put the making money part on hold until this program was created. So rather than just taking those calls and signing up those clients there and then, I said to myself, no, I need to create this program first. And I see this pattern play out so often, especially with women within the coaching industry, where they have all of these very simple ways where they could start generating an income within their business, but they feel like, okay, well, maybe that's too easy, maybe that's too simple, and they try to make things more complicated. So for some of you who have been, following my journey for a while, you'll know that stepping into my business, I had a lot of credit card debt. I had been very financially irresponsible, where I had been using online shopping as a way to suppress my emotions, avoid what I was feeling. And as a result, I had accumulated a lot of debt on a credit card. So then when it came to spending money and making investments within my business, I had a lot of guilt and shame tied in with that credit card debt, where I felt I can't be responsible for making big decisions like this. And therefore, I can't invest in myself. Look at what's happened previously. I can't be trusted with money. So I had to do a lot of work around that self-talk I had around money, because I recognized that being in that energy was attracting the same kind of people into my life. So I found that the people that I was connecting with on sales calls were equally struggling to trust themselves to make a decision financially. Perhaps they'd had bad experiences with money. They'd been in a lot of debt. They didn't feel empowered around money. And therefore, I was struggling to actually make any sales within my business. So for me, a big sort of shift was recognizing that Well, first of all, it was releasing myself of the shame and the guilt I had around the credit card debt. For me, that looked like a lot of forgiveness work. I had to really forgive myself. I had to stop blaming myself for my financial situation. I had to take ownership of my financial situation, but rather than, dwelling on how bad I had been with money previously, I started to adopt a new narrative, a new mantra for myself. Like, I am empowered around money. I am able to make great financial decisions. I don't hoard on to my money. I am putting my money into things that will help my money grow later down the line. And this was allowing me to then make better financial decisions for my business. It made me feel more comfortable investing in myself because I started to change that narrative I had around money. And the knock-on effect was that my energy changing around money, it was reflected in the type of people who I was attracting. The people that were financially empowered, the people that were able to make decisions about investing in themselves. Now, the other thing that really helped me feel good about selling was to really think about what it was that I was actually selling and actually really break down that correlation between time and money. So up until this point, I've been very much attached to this, how much is my time worth? And I think many of us, when we're a product of the corporate world, will have this same mentality because you get paid for the time you're spending in the office. You have your certain hours and you're getting paid a salary, and we can basically work out what our rate is per hour. I'd see this as well in the legal world because lawyers would charge per hour. They would have their rate, their hourly rate. And so that was kind of a good idea of what their time was worth. So it's very much this time for money equation. However, something I started to recognize was that when somebody invests in a coach, they're not necessarily investing in your time. And I had to start to realize that it's not my time that it is valuable, but it is the transformation that I can provide. That is the most valuable thing. And sometimes the biggest transformations can actually take the shortest amount of time. Breaking the time for money exchange was a real big one for me because, again, I kept looking at it as, okay, well, if I'm charging this much, it means I'm charging that much per hour. And can I really charge that because I'm relatively new to the industry and maybe I have to work up to those kinds of rates, and will somebody really pay that much for just a 1 hour session? And it was really weighing me down, and I had to really kind of take a step back and think, well, actually, when somebody is investing in a coach, what is it that they're spending their money on? It's not just to have that coaching call with me, it's the transformation. That's ultimately what we are selling. So rather than thinking, what is my time worth? It was thinking about, what is that transformation worth? Something that I am starting to see more of is this emphasis on your online presence. Now, of course, an online presence as a coach is incredibly powerful. And I think, as a marketing tool, being on social media and creating content is an incredibly powerful thing. However, it's not the only way to get clients, and the presence of somebody or the content they're creating or the views or the follower account that they have is not necessarily always a reflection of how great a coach they are. It's often a reflection of how great they are at marketing and creating content. So we have some women within the academy that hate social media. They don't want to be on social media every day. And they're amazing coaches. They're brilliant at what they do. And actually, they're getting clients, and they're getting clients in a way that feels true to them. And so these are women that, people have never heard of before. People don't know who these coaches are. They have hugely successful coaching businesses, but they're trailblazing their own path to success. And so I'm seeing a more of a trend with this, where women and coaches are recognizing that the outside version of success, what people often perceive to be as a successful coach or a successful business, there are other ways to doing things. It doesn't necessarily mean I need to be this really influential personal brand, or I need to have gazillion followers on Instagram, or I need to be posting daily. People are starting to recognize that there are other ways to create successful and sustainable coaching businesses. Sometimes the solutions actually present themselves really easily. So let's say something has cropped up in your life, a big problem, a big challenge, and you start stressing about it. Our natural instinct is to start overthinking all of the possible solutions, and it plays on our mind all day. How does that feel? It feels exhausting. It feels draining. It makes us feel stressed. And then we start perhaps to take action from that place of stress, desperation, and panic. But let me invite you to consider an alternative solution where you're presented with your challenge, and rather than thinking about it, you just assume that this challenge has just disappeared. Somebody else has figured it out and it no longer exists for you. You continue to go through your day as if this challenge just does not exist. You assume that it's already solved, it's already cleared, and you just don't even think about it. It may be that the challenge just solves itself. A solution just comes up and you've not had to even try to fix things. Remember that whatever we're giving our energy to, we are creating more of. So if we're thinking about our problems, we are just going to create more problems. Now, something that I see a lot of, often actually in the law of attraction space, is this idea that we've got to think positively, and we'll have to force ourselves to think positively to battle against our negative emotions. I was definitely guilty of this when I first discovered things like affirmations and, positive thinking. It was almost like I was trying to control my thoughts through willpower. Just, affirming, yeah, I am happy, I love myself, I am successful. And it just felt like this very forceful approach. Now, instead of doing it this way, what I found worked better was to actually just gently observe what I was thinking and what I was feeling, but without any judgment, without labeling the anxiety as bad or, the fear as bad. Just seeing them actually just as a temporary state of conscious that doesn't actually have any power over me. So a good example of this was back when I was very new to coaching and my finances were in a very big mess. I was, accumulating a lot of different debts on different credit cards, and it was making me feel overwhelmed. And whilst I did try and just bury my head in the sand and sort of neglect what was going on, I felt like I was actually constantly thinking about my finances and how I was going to change things. And it was almost like this frantic need to come up with some sort of solution. And the more I tried to push for a solution, the worse it seemed to get. Rather than trying to struggle to find a solution and take lots of action to try and see if I could figure out a way to make this work. So for example, my business, I was starting my coaching business. I realized that this sort of struggle and stress I was having to try and get my business off the ground was not going to work because it was keeping me in that lack mentality. So instead, I started to really get into a mental scene regularly where I was, paying my bills, all of the credit card debt was paid off already, money was flowing freely into my life. And yeah, maybe to begin with, it did feel like faking it until you make it, like pretending. But the thing with the subconscious mind is that when we present it with an image enough times, if we think about something enough times, the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. So over time, that started to feel like that was actually my reality. And I started to actually feel abundance throughout my day. And then things began to really shift for me in my business without really needing to try any harder. So business opportunities appeared, clients seemed to appear, things that I perhaps hadn't noticed before because I was so stressful. And I started to realize that things can come to me from unexpected sources. And before I knew it, I paid off my credit card debts, and that financial abundance was really starting to flow into my life. When I first heard of the concept of the mother wound, I didn't necessarily think that it applied to me, and I actually felt bad and guilty for even considering that I would have a mother wound, because I know that my mom has always put myself, my sisters, our priorities and our needs first, and has always had our best interest at heart. But this isn't to say that there can't be subtle wounds there that impact how we actually show up in our adult life. Now, the mother wound, it is nuanced. and it can manifest in very different ways. And it is often associated with dysfunctional relationships between a mother and their child. But as I said, it is possible to experience a mother wound even with a seemingly good or functional adult relationship with your mother. Now, let's just start with what actually is the mother wound. So it refers to an emotional and psychological pain that will often stem from a mother's inability to either nurture, support, or perhaps connect with her child. And then the result of that is that can lead to issues with self-esteem, worthiness, trust, difficulties with relationships in adulthood. Now, in many cases, this can stem from a dysfunctional mother-child relationship where there's neglect, emotional unavailability, maybe even abusive behaviors. And these experiences can then create these deep-seated feelings of inadequacy or unworthiness in the child, which then filters into their adult life. But going back to what I said, there can often be these subtle dynamics where even in a very good relationship, there can be things that contribute to the mother wound. So, for example, a mother could have really, really great intentions, but may struggle to validate her child's feelings or experiences. Now, as a result of this, a child can actually feel a sense of emotional neglect. Now, I want to quickly just touch upon the cost of visibility, because I think for many of us, we think of, okay, it's being judged, being criticized. So getting visible essentially magnifies these fears of failure or rejection. But what was interesting when I did my own work around visibility was the fear of loss of control. And something that I've really kind of done a lot of work around is my need to control the outcome. I like to micromanage things. I like to plan ahead. I like to kind of know what's going to happen. And feeling out of control makes me feel very unsafe. And it's something I've done a lot of work around. But it was interesting how it came into the visibility piece, because when we are getting visible, we're exposing ourselves to being vulnerable. And I think one of the reasons why vulnerability feels so scary is because we are relinquishing control over how others perceive us. So when we are getting visible, whether that's showing up online or, speaking up in a meeting, we're basically opening ourselves up to different interpretations, different judgments, various responses, and we can't manage these responses or predict how somebody's going to respond to us. And sometimes we might get misunderstood, or people might interpret what we're saying in an inaccurate way, and we don't necessarily always have control over this. And so this loss of control, it can actually feel quite intimidating, it can feel scary, and it really, again, taps into this deep-seated fear of being misunderstood, being misjudged, or perhaps even being dismissed. So for me, going back to what I said earlier about this experience as a child, being completely misunderstood and misread by a teacher, that really stuck with me. And so I can really see how that need to control really shows up in my adult life, and fearing being visible, because being visible means vulnerability, and it means I'm relinquishing that control over how others perceive me. So your intuition, it's not just guiding you towards what you want, but it's also going to help you navigate those obstacles and avoid any distractions. And for me, it's felt like that real deep knowing or sense of certainty about my next steps. My intuition is guiding me. And also tied in with this is that just feeling of authenticity. You feel aligned. You feel like you're being you. You feel like you're on your authentic path. So you're not just doing all of the things possible to try and force your manifestations into existence. You're doing things from a place of joy, of ease, of flow, of fun, of excitement. You're doing things because you feel called to do them, rather than from that place of necessity or panic. And this isn't to say that we can't manifest things from that place, because I've definitely manifested things from a place of working hard previously. I've manifested things, and I know that a large part has been the product of hustling or forcing for things or pushing for things. But I know that those manifestations have often not been sustainable, and the joy that I felt from those manifestations has often been short-lived, because I was so attached to the outcome and not necessarily focused on the joy of co-creating. Often those manifestations as well, I've received them, but then they've maybe quickly disappeared from my life. So let's say, for example, it's an income goal and I've worked relentlessly hard to get to that specific income goal, and I make that income goal and I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted, but I got there, told you I would through hard work. But then some unexpected financial setback occurs and the money that I've just manifested very quickly is needed to pay for certain things that were just completely unexpected. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had that experience when my manifestation has been through the product of hard work. Now, on that subject, that feeling pulled to take action, that desire to do something, to kind of that almost that kind of energy that you have, that you're like, yes, I'm going to seize the day today. I feel so excited and energized and I want to do something. That kind of like feeling of, I'm wanting to do something. But it's not coming from a place of panic or desperation. It's just coming from that sheer excitement, that sheer connection with your purpose, excited about your future, kind of that energy of hopefulness. I found whenever I'm about to step into a period of exponential growth, I have that strong desire and I'm very easily to get into a flow state with the things that I'm doing. So whether that's in my work or in my personal life, I'm taking lots of inspired action. Just action that feels really good and I'm feeling very energized. Wanting to build your own successful online coaching business, make sure to check out Freedom, Abundance and Impact, our free 10-day business and mindset course for coaches and aspiring coaches. To access, simply head to wearetheclique.com and click free course in the menu.